my name is Blanca, and this happened in my village, which is near a stream. My father always came home very drunk after going to the market. I don't have many happy memories from those days because he always hit my mother when he came home in that state. She would hide us in my grandmother's house so we wouldn't see, but we could still hear the screams. Both of them passed away a long time ago, but I still remember those moments, and they make me want to cry. After a few years, I met Gustavo and a lady named Teresa. At first, I thought she was a good person. She even brought me food sometimes and stayed to chat with me. One day, she asked if I trusted my husband, and I said I did. Then she pulled out a small plastic bag filled with dirt and a stone and told me to put it under my husband's pillow. I hesitated at first because she didn't explain what it was for. Then she left, leaving me with that unease. I was foolish to distrust my husband and decided to put the bag under his pillow. Days passed, and I noticed Gustavo was acting strangely. He wasn't eating and would wake up in the middle of the night screaming and sweating. He told me he heard voices and felt like something was watching him from the window. Worried, we went to see Dr. Mendez, who prescribed him medication because he only found a throat infection. Gustavo was fine. He just needed to rest for a few days to recover, so he stayed home for 2 days, sleeping all the time. However, a week after I had put the bag under his pillow while I was taking a shower, I heard a terrifying scream from the bedroom. I hurried out and saw my husband on the edge of the bed, crying uncontrollably. I asked him what was wrong, and he told me he heard voices in his head, voices of people he didn't know, speaking nonsense to him. Minutes later, he calmed down and fell asleep. I went back to the kitchen to wash some dirty dishes. Outside, the night was dark, with only the barking of dogs and the sound of crickets. When I finished washing the dishes, I went out to the yard to gather the laundry that had been left out to dry. But as I turned toward the bedroom window where my husband was sleeping, I saw a black shadow entering. I quickly ran to see what it was, and when I entered the room, my husband was still asleep. But at the head of the bed was that shadow in the shape of a man, reaching out as if trying to touch him. I screamed with all my might, and my husband woke up with a start. He asked me what was happening, and I told him I had seen a shadow. He told me to lie down and try to sleep, but I was very scared. And so the night passed. Before dawn, my husband got up to take a shower, and I got up to make his lunch because he had to go to work. But before I reached the kitchen, I swear I saw a man sitting in the living room out of the corner of my eye. I ran to the bathroom and told my husband that something bad was in the house. He came out of the bathroom and tried to calm me down, telling me everything would be fine. Slowly, I calmed down, and then it dawned. Around 11 in the morning, Teresa came and asked about my husband's health. I told her he was getting worse, and that we were experiencing strange things in the house. Teresa commented on the nature of the souls of the deceased, mentioning that they initially scare and then disappear. I was very intrigued by the bag of dirt she had given me, so I asked her about its contents. She explained that it contained cemetery soil, a fragment of bone, and a stone. When I asked her why she had given me that, she said it was to keep my husband with me. After this brief explanation, Teresa left without adding anything else. I felt repulsed by the bag, so I threw it far away, across the yard towards the stream. I felt a little relieved to get rid of that thing, but was still worried about what was happening. That night, my husband came home as usual. We had dinner together, and then we went to bed. In the middle of the night, something strange woke us up. We had to run to the field because we saw shadows emerging from the nearby stream in the yard. I can assure you that I saw figures of children and women in long, old-fashioned dresses. We turned on the light before running out, and we saw a girl sitting on the ground, playing with the dirt. She was wearing a very dirty yellow dress, and her hair was full of dirt and dry leaves. When she looked up, her eyes were completely black. Although we didn't want to go through the cemetery, we had no other option. As we ran, we heard laughter in the darkness. It was Teresa, who was among the graves shouting things about the devil. When we reached the field, my husband and I stopped for a moment to catch our breath. We were tired and very confused. We didn't understand what was happening or why we were seeing those things. We decided to go to my aunt's house, who lived a bit farther away, to ask for help and spend the night there. When we arrived, we told her everything we had seen, and she listened attentively. She offered us her home to spend the night and made us some hot tea to calm us down. In the following days, we tried not to think much about what had happened, but it was difficult to forget those images and the sounds we had heard. We decided to talk to some people in the village to see if anyone else had experienced something similar. When talking to the neighbors, we discovered that we were not the only ones who had seen strange things in the area. A neighbor told us she had seen shadows moving in her garden and heard laughter and whispers at night. Another neighbor said he had seen a woman dressed in white walking near the stream, and when he tried to approach her, the figure disappeared. My husband died 2 months later due to diabetes, and Teresa never came back to the house. They say she has already died, but no one knows where she is buried or what happened to her body. They say that after learning of her death, she was seen walking in the neighborhood, heading towards a house near the entrance. People say that a witch used to live there a long time ago. One day I was hanging clothes and I heard a whistle coming from the nearby forest and saw an old woman in long clothes disappearing into the ravine of the stream. I will never understand why I listened to that damn old woman, bringing witchcraft into my home. Hello community, my name is Mateo, and I am from the province of Tucumán in Argentina. What I am about to share with you happened to me one night after spending a good time playing soccer with my friends. That night, my mother called me to say she would be home late after going downtown to buy some things. It was 9 o'clock at night, so since no one would be home, I told her I would be a little late too. I kept talking with my friends, and around 11 each of us said goodbye and went in different directions to our homes. I headed to mine, which is near the cemetery, past a high school. I was listening to music on my phone when suddenly I began to feel a strange sensation as if someone was watching me. The night was calm, no rain or cold, a normal night, but something in the atmosphere didn't feel right. I continued walking, and when I reached the street next to the old cemetery, I felt like someone was following me. I looked back and saw a stray dog, which made me nervous because I felt it might want to attack me, though it was just following me. But when I turned toward the high school, where the entrances to both cemeteries, the old and the new, are located, I heard a voice asking for help. The voice seemed to be of a woman and came from the new cemetery. With the little courage I had left, I decided to investigate since the cemetery gate was open. I looked around and turned on my phone's flashlight. The voice continued to be heard from inside, and although I couldn't explain why, at that moment I felt compelled to follow the sound. So I entered the cemetery trying to find where the voice was coming from. I asked out loud where the person was, and the voice replied, telling me to come closer. I didn't feel fear at that moment. I only had the idea in my mind that someone needed help. I walked a few more steps, noticing how the sound became increasingly clear. Suddenly, a friend who had seen me enter the cemetery decided to follow me to play a prank and surprised me from behind by grabbing my shoulders. I was so scared that I felt like I was about to faint. He asked me what I was doing, and I told him about the woman asking for help. At first, he didn't believe me, but then he also heard the voice. Although he was a bit skeptical, he decided to accompany me to investigate further. The silence in that place was almost absolute. We ventured deeper into the cemetery, following that pained voice. Suddenly, the tone of the female voice changed, as if it had moved a great distance away in an instant. My friend suggested we should leave, thinking it might be a spirit, or even the famous Llorona. I replied that those beings weren't real, but just as we were about to leave, the voice echoed again, this time much closer than we had heard it the last time. Using the light from our phones, we discovered a black silhouette a few meters from us. It might have been the scare or an error in my vision, but that thing didn't seem to touch the ground. Fear paralyzed us. I felt my legs heavy, trembling like never before. That silhouette slowly approached and we remained motionless, not knowing how to react. After what seemed like endless seconds, we started to back away carefully. My friend suggested we jump the fence of the nearby school while that figure continued to get closer and closer. We retreated a few steps until suddenly we heard a sigh behind us. I turned and saw a very tall woman standing on a tombstone with her arms raised to the sky. We both screamed in terror and panic, and we began to run between the graves trying to escape those macabre figures. As we ran, we could hear their screams just a few meters behind us, but we never dared to look back. Fortunately, we are very fast and we escaped, and once outside the cemetery, we kept running until we reached my house. My legs were shaking so much that I could barely stand. When we arrived, we told my mother everything. She listened attentively and then told us we shouldn't be in the cemetery at that time of night. Seeing our pale and frightened faces, she served us hot tea to calm us down. While drinking the tea, we tried to explain what we saw, although our words seemed insufficient to describe the fear we felt. Since that night, I avoid passing by that cemetery. I prefer to take a longer route rather than go near that eerie place again. Unfortunately, I couldn't find closure to that horrible event. Who were they? Why were they there? Why did they call us? I think it's something that will never have an answer. This happened in 2017. I live near the cemetery and had never witnessed anything out of the ordinary. My name is Ulysses. One night I went out to chat with my friends. We stayed at a small park and it got very late. Between conversations and laughter, it was 2 in the morning. I grabbed my backpack and headed home, walking as usual with my headphones on, thinking about getting home soon to shower and rest. As I approached the street that runs alongside the cemetery, there was a dark spot where the streetlight never worked, and it's common to see people drinking there. I passed through that area, and suddenly someone crossed my path. I took off my headphones and greeted them, saying good evening. I couldn't see clearly. I just made out a figure standing on the sidewalk. I stepped aside to keep walking, but that figure moved in the same direction. I asked what they wanted, and then I heard a woman's voice, an elderly voice, asking for help to get home. She said she lived near where I lived. It seemed strange to me how she said it, because I had never heard anyone speak so slowly, and as if they had no energy. So I decided to help her, and we started walking together. We came out of the shadow, and I saw that it was an old woman with a maroon embroidered shawl covering her face and wearing a black skirt. I didn't see her feet, or rather I didn't pay attention to them. The lady seemed to have difficulty walking, so I took her by the arm. I had never felt an arm so thin and fragile. She thanked me with a very soft voice. We walked slowly and began to talk. She told me she lived alone, that her youngest son was in the United States and had left a long time ago. She also mentioned that she was born a long time ago. I asked what year she was born, but she said she didn't remember. Then she commented that she found it strange how I dressed and asked why I had long hair, even though my hair was short. As we continued down the road, the old woman started telling me that it had been many years since anyone visited her and that she often felt very lonely. I felt very sorry for her, but I also began to feel uncomfortable because of the strange way she expressed herself. When we were just a few meters from the cemetery entrance, the woman mentioned that she was close to her home. I was quite surprised, as she had mentioned living on a street near mine. Suddenly, the light post by the cemetery went out of nowhere. All the hair on my body stood on end, and I noticed that the woman's thin arm seemed to thicken, as if it were changing shape. Without thinking, I let go of her arm immediately, told her I was going to take out my phone light, and opened my backpack to look for my cell phone. When I turned on the flashlight, I saw the woman's face just inches from mine. Her face was not normal. Her skin clung to her bones, almost like a skull, or someone very sick. I hurriedly stepped back and she asked if I wanted to enter her house. She raised her arm and held an old lamp, pointing towards the cemetery. My legs froze with fear. She removed her shawl, revealing a black rosary on her chest and her almost bald head with little hair. She started laughing disturbingly. At that moment, the light post turned on again, and she disappeared. Without hesitation, I ran as fast as I could until I got home. When I arrived, I told my mother and cousin what I had seen. My mother, angry, scolded me for staying out so late and advised me to light a candle as a sign of respect. I followed her advice and lit the candle, hoping it would calm the negative energies I felt. Since that night, I have never walked alone in that area again. What impacts me the most about that experience is that I felt like I had accompanied something not of this world back to the cemetery. Every time I think about that moment, I get chills, and it reminds me that there are things we cannot fully explain. My life changed after that night. Now I always make sure to be accompanied when I go out late and avoid passing through dark and lonely places. Good evening, community. My name is Rogelio, and I have been working at the cemetery in my community for 9 years. People always ask me if I'm not afraid, or if I've witnessed strange things. I tell them that I am used to being surrounded by graves, and that I don't scare easily. I'm a calm person and enjoy the peace, so this job is ideal for me. I've experienced many peculiar situations during my night rounds. Hearing laughter, cries, and murmurs is a common occurrence for me. However, something truly surprising must happen to impress me. About 6 months ago, when I arrived for my shift from 6 in the evening to 6 in the morning, my coworker mentioned that someone had painted something on a tombstone. I went to check and found drawings of a house and a smiling face. It was the grave of a small child, but it was very neglected, without flowers, and it seemed like it hadn't been visited for a long time. I felt very sad, so I placed some flowers and cleaned the tombstone a bit. That night, everything went smoothly. The next night, as I went about my rounds as usual, I felt the need to visit the child's grave. To my surprise, the flowers I left were gone, and there was another drawing of a little house on the tombstone. I thought my coworker was playing a prank on me since he had done it before, and I didn't trust him. After finishing my rounds, I went back to the entrance, turned on the radio, and had the dinner my wife had prepared for me. Around 2 in the morning, I started to feel sleepy. With my eyes half closed, I looked towards the window of a nearby tomb. Suddenly, I saw something run by very quickly. I decided to take another round, thinking it could be a thief, a drunk, or some youngster trespassing. With my flashlight, I checked every corner of the cemetery. I reached an area we call the snail because the graves are arranged in circles. The smell there is very peculiar. It feels very cold, and the atmosphere is very tense. Upon arriving at this section, I saw a child with his back to me, wearing a red sweater and a brown hat. I asked who he was and what he was doing there, but the child kept walking without saying a word. I can't deny that my whole body was trembling with fear. I approached a little closer and carefully was about to touch his shoulder. But at that precise moment, the child disappeared. I swear he vanished right in front of my eyes. Out of fear, I dropped my flashlight and the batteries fell out, leaving me without vision. I tried to locate them, but the darkness was overwhelming since many trees blocked the moonlight. Suddenly, from the far end of the cemetery, I heard a child's lament calling for his mother. I stood still, paralyzed by terror, and started to sweat cold. Without thinking twice, I ran as fast as I could from there. When I reached the entrance, I looked at the clock and saw that there were only a few hours left until the end of my shift. I tried to relax, but that event left me very uneasy. At dawn, before leaving, I decided to take one last round to ensure everything was in order. Passing near the child's grave, I noticed something strange. The earth was disturbed, and I managed to read a word written in it. Mom. That vision remained etched in my memory, impossible to forget. I'm not the only one who has had these experiences. My coworker has also seen the same child walking among the graves. He told me that once, while on his night rounds, he saw the child from behind, wearing the same red sweater and brown hat. He tried to talk to him, but the child didn't respond and simply walked away slowly. My coworker followed him, but at one point the child disappeared without a trace. He also told me that one night while he was in the guardhouse, he heard laughter and small footsteps near the entrance. He went out to investigate, thinking that some child had entered the cemetery, but he found no one. The feeling that something strange was happening didn't leave him at peace, so he decided to tell me about his experience. We both started to notice that during our night rounds, we often saw things out of the ordinary. Shadows that moved quickly, whispers that seemed to come from nowhere, and of course, the figure of the child. These experiences led us to investigate more about the cemetery's history, and in particular, about the child's grave. We asked the neighbors and the elders of the place, who told us stories about the little boy. Apparently, the child had died tragically many years ago, and his mother, devastated by her loss, visited his grave regularly. However, over time the visit stopped and the grave was forgotten. We decided to take care of the child's grave, cleaning it and placing flowers regularly. Despite the fear we felt, we also had a kind of compassion for the boy and wanted to do something for him. Every time we passed by his grave, we noticed small changes like moved toys or flowers that disappeared. One night during one of my rounds, I brought a small candle and lit it in front of the child's grave. In doing so, I felt a kind of peace that I had never felt before. I stayed there for a while, in silence, and felt as if the child was grateful. Since then, we light a candle every night at his grave, and although the strange experiences continue, we now feel that somehow we are helping the child's soul finally find peace. Thank you for listening to these stories. I hope you enjoyed them. Much more content is on the way. Subscribe and activate the little bell so you don't miss any of the upcoming videos. Have a great evening, everyone. See you next time.